This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have MK Lords coming in from Pensacola, Florida. She's the editor at Bitcoin Not Bombs. She's also organizing the upcoming Bitcoin in the Beltway conference coming up in Washington, D.C. She's an activist with Sean's Outpost, and of course we just had Jason King of Sean's Outpost on with us at Anarchast, so we'll talk about things like that and a lot of Bitcoin kind of related stuff. She's also a fire dancer, so we'll talk a little bit about that and what she does there. So it's going to be interesting. But first of all, MK Lords, I have to ask you, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jeff. I really appreciate it. So my anarchism is influenced from where I grew up, which is Pensacola, Florida, and it's located in Escambia County, which is the poorest county in Florida. And it's also kind of in the Bible Belt area. There's a lot of very far right-wing conservative activism that goes on in the area. You know, Republicans have pretty much run the town since forever. So as I was growing up, I think I have a bit of a rebellious streak in me. I kind of backlash really far to the left. So I first got introduced to anarchism from left anarchism probably about 10 years ago when I was like 15 years old. And it kind of turned me off from anarchism for a while because I wasn't so much down with the violence and breaking things and stuff like that. So from there, I kind of went into progressivism, just traditional left kind of activism. I grew up kind of during the Bush era, and I became very, very anti-George Bush. I was very much against the wars. I thought everything his administration was doing was terrible. So by default, I thought I was part of the left. And when the election started coming up in 2008, I was looking at the different candidates, and I'd already registered as a Democrat, and I was like, there has to be a Democrat candidate. Just about anyone has got to be better than Bush, right? So I started listening to these guys talking, and I was kind of thinking about, oh, here's this Obama guy, he's, you know, interesting, not so much into Hillary. I wasn't a huge fan of the Clintons either. And I started listening to these guys speaking, and it kind of dawned on me, they're not really saying much. I wasn't, you know, they're not saying anything of substance. And some of my friends introduced me to a guy named Ron Paul. And at first I was kind of turned off. I was like, who's this old, like, white guy? We don't need another old white Republican in the White House. And I started listening to him. I was like, wait a second, he's saying some really interesting things here. And that kind of led me in the direction of libertarianism. I kind of stayed on the left side of libertarianism for a while, but I just started reading more philosophy, things like Rothbard, and kind of moving more, I would say, maybe center. And then I really got disgusted with politics in general. I was very active in the 2008 Ron Paul campaign, and politics I found was just really dirty, and I didn't want anything to do with it. So I wasn't as active in 2012, obviously, because by then I was an anarchist, and I realized that the state was the root cause of all of these problems. And what brought me over to anarchism and libertarianism in general was the proof that it was being used to help people, like in regard to social justice and things like that. So I was very much interested in those aspects of it, and from there I kind of went more radical. Now I would describe myself as somewhat of a panarchist. You know, I think people should be allowed to choose what kind of system of organization they want to live in, as long as they let me kind of do my own thing and leave me alone.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I believe as well, and that's what anarchy is all about, is do whatever you want as long as you don't cause me harm or steal from me or anything like that. Do anything you want as long as you don't do that. And from that, it actually makes life really simple. It's funny that more people haven't really caught on to anarchy. Just you hear all these things, and of course in the mainstream media, on the boob tube, on the prostitutes, they're always bringing up all these issues. Here's a new issue when we have to decide what to think of it. And the whole thing is, well, is it actually initiating violence against anyone else? If not, it's fine. And that's basically it. It makes life so much simpler when you just have this very basic understanding or philosophy or ideology about life. Whereas if you're one of these left or right status, when you see these issues, it's always, well, maybe we'll allow that. And and because well, maybe I'll lean that way on this thing. It's like, no, like, do you have any principles whatsoever? What kind of moronic status, sheeple do you have? You don't have any principles. Of course, life is very difficult if you have no principles. Like, have one principle, just one. Like, give me a principle, but they don't ever, and that's why it really creates. When you watch the TV in the U.S., it's just constant debates and well, I think this is okay in this situation. It's like, no, it comes down to one thing: are you initiating violence against others? If not, it's fine. You can leave it alone. Like, you can have opinions on it if you want, and of course, everyone has opinions on everything. But when it comes down to an actual debate about whether we should allow it or not, it really comes down to the initiation of violence.
Absolutely, and I think cutting television out of my life was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I stopped watching television probably around the time, a little after the time I moved out, which was probably like 18. I was like 18, 19 years old, and we completely got rid of the TV. And it's like, oh yeah, everyone's just sitting around talking about cool stuff now, and it's like, kind of like how it's supposed to be. It was always weird how people would come over and let's all just sit in front of a screen and absorb. It's like, I don't want to do that. I want to engage.
Yeah, I really haven't watched TV except for sports. I do enjoy, I admit, I'm from Canada originally, and I just like watching hockey, especially the playoffs, just to relax at night sometimes. It's just my way of relaxing. I don't get all involved in, rah-rah for this team too much or that team. I just like to enjoy the competition and that sort of a thing. But I really haven't watched, I'm trying to think of the last time I really had a TV in the house and actually watched it in terms of the way that most people in the U.S. do, where they come home from work and they sit there all night in front of the thing. I can't remember the last time. It's got to be probably in the 90s because once the internet started to come out, especially in the 2000s, there was things I did want to watch. Things like Breaking Bad is a show that I enjoyed watching. It was another way to relax and enjoy, entertainment. But to actually turn on a TV and watch it, it's been decades. And yeah, it makes life so much easier. And I don't know what it is about TV, especially in the US, because I just realize now when I turn it on, or if I'm in an airport, for example, where they have CNN on, if I watch it for more than a few minutes, my heart starts to race because they're going so fast and they're so like alert and something's happened over here and we have to go over there right now. And it's usually just like it's raining or something and they make everything sound all crazy. And I just, I have to just put on my headphones or walk away from it. And it really makes you realize that once you don't watch it anymore.
Absolutely, and what's kind of changed in the last 30 years or so with television is the frames per second have changed, literally. And I took a TV production class in high school, and this is something we kind of learned about before. And you can still go back and look at old movies too. You have these long screenshots and just kind of very focused acting, things like that. And now if you compare it to like reality TV or something terrible, it's just like, what's going on over here? Or like squirrel, like all this crazy stuff going on. It's stressful. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people should just really turn off the television. I'm sure most people who are watching this probably already do. It's just mindless drivel for the most part. And then you turn on the news and it's all propaganda. It's interesting to hear your perspective that you started sort of as a leftist anarchist. I don't believe in this left or right anarchist thing. There's just anarchists. If you believe in the non-initiation of violence, and that's it. You can have views on how the world works and things like that, but there is no left or right, in my opinion. What's your view on these anarcho-communists or leftist anarchists? And like you said, they seem to break a lot of things and start a lot of riots and things like that. What's your take on them?
So that's kind of the stereotype you see. I do work with left anarchists, though, and I think it's useful to have a qualifier because there is differences. Basically, the difference comes down to what they believe will happen as a natural result after the state is done away with. So a lot of people believe it would be more peaceful and kind of voluntary, and you'd have more control, more private control over businesses, whereas some people think that once you do away with like state crony capitalism, that things would kind of naturally be a more worker-run, worker-oriented economy. So there's a slight difference in economic principles. I think overall we have a very similar goal, and I've had a lot of success talking with left anarchists and, working with them on various projects. And I do agree, though, I don't really like to qualify my anarchism so much. I'm not a right or left anarchist. No rulers is pretty much my rule, I guess. So anything that you do that, is not affecting others, shouldn't be an issue. So, and that's a huge, libertarian streak. So it's very interesting. I think there's room for all different varieties of anarchism, and that's really great because I want to say competing systems. If we do reach a state where there is no central government, I think it would be natural to have these offshoots of anarchism, and even from like a tribalistic standpoint, you have people who want to form around certain ideas and trade with others. I think you'd see kind of a fractioning out of different ideas and competing systems. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It is exciting. It would be so exciting to see that and see all the different things that people are doing and what works and what doesn't. I definitely hope there's a Bitcoin gambling site for it. So it says which area is going to do better in general in terms of prosperity. This one that they've decided to form a voluntary commune, or this one where they decided to not do that and actually have more of a capitalist approach of free markets and things like that, and private property. So yeah, it would be fascinating, be interesting. I think it's starting to happen in small ways. We're starting to see the statism just falling apart around the world for many different reasons, and we're seeing people secede. All sorts of areas want to secede now. Recently, Venice, Italy voted 90% plus to secede from Italy. Scotland, of course, has been wanting to secede. There's numerous states, and we're going to see more and more of that. And of course, that's not anarchism at all. That's just having another state, a smaller state that breaks off from a larger one. But that's really the progression that's probably going to happen. Is we'll have more and more governments, which is interesting because as anarchists, we really don't want any government. But in order to get to anarchy, we actually have to want more and more, and which means smaller and smaller until it eventually gets to the size where it's just an individual, which is 7 billion governments on Earth. And I've said this a few times, but the only real downside of having 7 billion governments on Earth, in my opinion, is that the opening ceremonies of the Olympics will be even more boring and more drawn out than usual, as each and every single person on Earth goes through with their flags and their colors. But other than that, I can't see too much downside. But one interesting thing that I've noticed about Anarchast and interviewing anarchists over the last year is up until about a year ago, we rarely even talked about Bitcoin. It was sort of this side topic that we sort of talked about, and now I can't get an anarchist on where their whole life is almost surrounded around Bitcoin. It just becomes such a big part of a lot of anarchists' lives, and of course it has with you. You're a writer for Bitcoin Not Bombs, and you're helping organize or organizing Bitcoin in the Beltway, which I'll be appearing at, and I'll come up with a speech title for you soon. You're telling me I haven't done that yet, but I'm sure I will before I get there. And yeah, why don't we talk about Bitcoin? So what's your history with Bitcoin? When did you first hear about it, and what do you think of it today?
So I heard about it about a year and a half ago. Well, I heard about it initially closer to about 2 years ago. And at first, I didn't really pay much attention to it. And I worked in the precious metals industry, which a lot of your precious metals people are still very kind of anti-Bitcoin. They kind of view it suspiciously. And it was something that I kind of viewed with suspicion too, or at least skepticism. So I kind of learned about it. I read a little bit on it, and then I just kind of forgot about it for several months. And it really started to kind of pop up more naturally in conversations I was having with different libertarians. So I was just really curious. I really started reading more into it, and my brother actually messaged me. He was saying, "Hey, you should really look into Bitcoin. Like, you should buy some Bitcoin right now." And it was like it had just reached, silver was close to the same price as Bitcoin, and I remember that was a huge psychological barrier for me because I was like, okay, I definitely believe people should be investing in silver. But here's Bitcoin, and it's coming up to about the same price, and it seems like it's not really going to stop for a while. And I realized more about what gave it value, because there's this huge argument of, well, Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value. Well, I mean, neither do precious metals, really. It's you choose the value that your currency has. So it was something I learned more about, and I realized it was being used to help people too. And I started just researching more about it and writing a little bit about it. I realized the potential that it had as far as blockchain technology for organizing society, even things like voluntary governments or contract law or various things that could be branched off from just the currency function of Bitcoin. So I started writing for Bitcoin Not Bombs. My friend Drew Phillips was like, would you like to write for Bitcoin Not Bombs? And I was very much excited about the anti-war elements of it. When two countries are at war, there's all of these economic sanctions. There's, you know, you're not going to be having free trade, and it's the governments who are waging war against each other. It's not the people who want to fight these wars a lot of times. So I saw it as a way to get aid to people in other countries that are being devastated by war. And Bitcoin Not Bombs actually came out of a partnership with antiwar.com. So that's how that started. And the first person I interviewed for Bitcoin Not Bombs was Jason King. I found out about Jason and I was like, oh man, we're in Pensacola together. Here's another person who's into Bitcoin. He's using it to feed homeless people. I found out shortly after he posted on Reddit about the first time he posted on Reddit where he was saying, you know, I could feed 40 homeless people with 1 Bitcoin. Send me your Bitcoin. And they did. And he started feeding people with Sean's Outpost. And so I interviewed him, and that really kind of solidified my position on Bitcoin. I was still curious about it. I still didn't know a whole lot about how it worked from the technical side, but I started realizing the potential it had for the unbanked especially, and for homeless people in Pensacola were using Bitcoin before probably a lot of other people just in the region, which is very interesting. And they were living off of it, and they were surviving, and it was helping them get into houses. I mean, this is incredible technology that's very liberating, and that's what's exciting to me about Bitcoin is its potential. And blockchain technology in general, whether or not it's Bitcoin, just the blockchain technology itself has so many possibilities with it. So that's kind of what I do at Bitcoin Not Bombs. I interview a lot of different people, different people involved in Bitcoin. I ask how they got involved and the trajectory that they're kind of on, because there are so many possibilities, there's so many people involved going in different routes. So it's all extremely exciting, and technology is such a tool for liberation. You have something like the internet that's expanded communication worldwide. And like you were saying, when it comes down to people choosing their own governments or seceding from governments, I think you are going to see that happen more often, and it's going to be technology driven. As people gain more access to information, they can become more, and that's the key right there. So I think it's very disruptive to government too, which is exciting as an anarchist.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great to see that with Bitcoin Not Bombs, you're anarchists trying to help people who have been totally devastated by statism through the free market money of Bitcoin. It's beautiful, and it's great to see. And I will put links down below to Bitcoin Not Bombs. I'm sure people can donate through that site. Is that correct?
Yes, and each year we do, we started it last year. This will be our second year doing the Hoodie the Homeless project, which is a project to basically send Bitcoin donations, and we get homeless people hoodies as it starts getting colder. And last year we did it in California. This year we're hoping to expand it to a few more cities, including Pensacola and a couple other places. So yeah, we're very much about charity also.
Yeah, us anarchists were terrible. You know, we're going around donating Bitcoin to homeless people who wouldn't be homeless without the government and the central banks, who have all made that happen through impoverishing the entire economy and inflating the currency so that people can't even afford to live. And then, of course, they don't get any sort of, not any very real benefits from the status system. And I just interviewed Jason King, and he was talking about how hard it is for people to get anything out of the system. So it's just amazing that still to this day people talk about anarchists like we're just horrible people or we're crazy people. We're the only people making any sort of logical sense, and we're the only people really making real change in the world for the better right now. You brought up a great point. You were mentioning how there's been a some of the people into Bitcoin originally, some of the people that have been criticizing Bitcoin, the people who are into precious metals a lot, they've actually all been changing quite a bit. I've been watching, it's been fascinating to watch because about a year or two ago, when Bitcoin, especially about a year ago, when Bitcoin started becoming quite popular in the media a lot, there was quite a few people, including people like Jim Rogers, Peter Schiff, a lot of the hard money sort of, what you call libertarians, they're not anarchists. They're unfortunately still very immoral people. They believe in theft and violence to some extent, which is terrible. And I really would admonish them to get rid of those ideas. Those are horrible ideas. But they were very against Bitcoin. They sort of saw it as sort of a competition. In some ways it kind of is, but in many ways it isn't. And What I've seen in the last few months, including Peter Schiff of Euro Pacific, he was very anti-Bitcoin, and he started accepting now Bitcoin for precious metals at Europac Bank. And I saw his press release about it, and he was kind of walking the fine line, trying to not say that he was wrong about it. He still kind of said, I still don't really like it all that much, but I'll take it for precious metals. But yeah, they're slowly changing. They're starting to realize, I think a lot of them too didn't understand. It's like yourself, you're a younger person, you didn't even understand. They're older. Jim Rogers is, I believe, in his 70s now. They don't know a lot about computers or the internet in general, and so when they heard about this, they just thought it was some crazy internet token or some video game weight credit or something along those lines. They didn't really understand it, but it is interesting to see them coming around to it more and more. And even Jim Rogers just recently said that he's just very sad he didn't buy Bitcoin a few years ago. Of course he is. Everyone is if they didn't. But it's just funny. They're slowly coming around. So it's very interesting to watch the Bitcoin space right now. And of course, we've just seen Bitcoin go up from about $450 to almost $700 in the last month or two. And it's interesting because, of course, that's almost 80% gain in 2 months. Of course, when Bitcoin went down about 50% recently in the start of the year from over 1,000 to under 500, it was all over the media that the Bitcoin was dead, that it's crashed, it's never coming back. The Bitcoin company, Mt. Gox, is out of business, so Bitcoin's done. And of course, that wasn't the case. And now we're seeing Bitcoin up nearly 80% in the last few months. And of course, the media is not talking about it at all. And that's another reason you should turn off your TV and just pay attention more to what's going on the internet and people like alternative media that are talking about more the real truth about what's going on.
Yeah, and as Bitcoiners like to say, Bitcoin crashes up. So you're constantly seeing, every time it goes down just a little bit, you have all of these media outlets saying, oh, it's over, it's over. But these are the same people who are lying to us about the wars, and they're lying to us about, oh, I don't know, the NSA spying on us. So I don't really trust a lot of kind of mainstream media sources. You're not getting real information. I mean, you can't really trust anything they say at this point. They've pretty much discredited themselves. You have something like Yahoo Web saying 40% of Americans are undecided when it comes to the Edward Snowden case, whether he's a traitor or a hero or whatever you want to say. And but more people so 40% are undecided. Slightly more are on the, oh, he's definitely a traitor kind of side of things. And it's like, I can't think of any time 40% of people have been able to not make up their mind about something. I mean, this is like, every asshole has an opinion.
Yeah, in the U.S. it's funny because, yeah, you usually will see a poll where they ask a question like that, and it'll always be one side or the other almost completely, and it'll only be 1 or 2% who are undecided. And it actually should be closer to 100% because most people in the U.S. have no clue what's going on, so they shouldn't have an opinion on something unless they actually have a clue about what's going on. But like you said, almost everyone in the U.S. seems to have an opinion on everything, no matter how little they know about it. So you do some fire dancing and things like that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so I do fire hula hoop dancing. I started a few years ago. I first saw hoop dancing at a festival I was at. A friend of mine was dancing with a hula hoop, and I thought it looked really interesting. And I have a dance and theater background, so I did like jazz and tap and stuff like that. Theater for a really long time, and kind of took a break for a few years. And I saw this girl dancing at a festival with a hula hoop, and it was really beautiful and graceful. And she ended up giving me one of her hoops, and I started making my own. So I was serving tables at the time. I just dropped out of college, and that was a really difficult time financially. I was going to school full time, but also having to work full time to pay for it. And it was kind of a lot of financial uncertainty. So I started making hula hoops for my friends and just other people who wanted them, and doing lessons and teaching myself how to dance with a hoop because it's slightly different. So then from there I started performing, and these were all things I could do kind of as an agorist, something to help supplement my income, but it's also a creative outlet. And the way I kind of look at things, my position on taxes, for example, I pay my taxes so that I don't get thrown in a cage, but I'm not going to let them get a chunk of my art. So that's a huge important factor for me, is it's something that's a creative thing that I'm involved in, and I really love doing it. Now the fire part came in when I was about halfway. Let's see, I've been hooping for almost 5 years now, and it came in about halfway through. Basically, it's just a hula hoop with 5 or 6 wicks attached to them. So there's like a steel spine about 4.5 inches off the hoop with a Kevlar wick on the end that you dip in fuel and light on fire. And you have to dance a little bit differently with that than with a regular hula hoop, but it's very exhilarating and very fun. So I do private shows and stuff like that around town.
That's great. I always enjoy watching females with hula hoops. It's just something nice about it. But let's finish this off. Why don't you tell us where people can get more information? I know you're at Bitcoin Not Bombs. You're with Sean's Outpost. Why don't you just tell people a little bit where they can find that information?
Yeah, so bitcoinnotbombs.com. I also write for Bitcoin Magazine. You can go to bitcoinmagazine.com. And I write for a couple other crypto publications, Crypto Biz magazine, and yeah, and I do work with Sean's Outpost. I'm not so much writing for them as much, just as far as content, but and I also have a personal blog called Extremely In Between, which is kind of like my journey as a kind of weird anarchist without adjectives thing, trying to take a balanced position on things, I guess. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
That's great. So that's MK Lourdes coming in from Pensacola, Florida. I'd like to thank her for coming on and check out her stuff. And definitely if you got some Bitcoins and you're looking for worthy causes, sounds like she's involved with a number of them. So check it out. And that's been Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
This is Anarchast.